Fallout Equestria Child of the Stars Chapter 6, Part 3. In the light of my magic, I could see the stairs ahead turn sharply before doubling back on themselves and sinking deeper into the gloom. Above, an ambient red light was accompanied by the faint whirring of a motor as the turret slowly rotated, just as lost as all the others. With a swift flash of my magical energy, the turret met its end with a grinding spark, illuminating the darkness. It fell, rattling the metal staircase and eliciting a sharp eep from Cherry, somewhere in the shadows behind me. I shifted the sparking wreckage aside before rounding the corner, while behind me I could hear my companion poke a hoof at the metals and wires, undoubtedly searching for more bargaining materials. A part of me just imagined how much a pony could gain if they managed to make a profit on every little thing they found, while another part of me demanded that I remain focused. I was in a dark room, in a dangerous place, but Celestia knows what else. For once, I had to side with my instincts. They hadn't kept me alive in the wasteland for so long because I ignored them. Sub-level 2, the next sign read as I passed through the double doors at the bottom of the stairs. Beyond yet was another long gloomy corridor. It was both fortunate and unnerving that the number of targets displayed on my visor remained 0. All of a sudden, there was a bright flash and several lights flickered to life. Many popped and smashed, sending a wave of shock and terror through me as I jumped back, my rump hitting the door as Cherry came through. I gasped, cursing every pony who had ever lived for making such unreliable things as light bulbs. I realized that Cherry had backpedaled up the stairs slightly, and I looked back to see the mare slightly stunned, her eyes wide with confusion. I winced, knowing that I'd practically just flung my tail in her face. "Sorry," I stammered weakly, trying to make the situation any more awkward. "Raider victim. No touchy-touchy," my mind reminded me swiftly, shaking its metaphorical head in disappointment. No, I should have watched where I was going. Sorry," Cherry stammered, her face reddening deeply. She rubbed a forehoof on the back of her neck, her eyes darting out for anything that could change the subject. Fighting my own blush, I readily obliged, turning forward again as if nothing had transpired. "Fuck you, Wasteland," I grumbled sourly under my breath as the sinister entity sought to turn something as simple as a light bulb against me in a way that didn't involve killing. Those same lights now lit the corridor ahead. I had a strange sensation that some pony was watching us, playing with us. Maybe it was the ghost, my mind suggested in a vain attempt at a scary tone. "No, Brain, ghosts don't exist," I mumbled to my wild thoughts. It was then that I noticed that the situation was in fact very strange. Following the lights that had come on, I realized that not all had done so. In fact, those had not exploded, now forming a glowing trail leading into a room right of the hall. Peering through a set of reinforced windows, I could see what appeared to be a large laboratory of some kind. Row after row of long tables stretched across the room, all lined with shattered glass and aged lab equipment. That didn't disturb me the most, however. No, what did was the fact that most of the room was still swarming with murky darkness. The light trail continuing through an open door on the opposite side. The lights were tempting us forwards. Both the door and the wall it was set into were formed from thick metal, covered by fine white paint only on the exposed sides, as if to look like something normal. This room had been quite secure back when it was in use, and I couldn't help but feel that it had been for a reason. Now it was open, and I had the nagging feeling that we were not only being watched, but led somewhere. "Ghosts aren't real," I mentally shouted to myself, taking a tentative step inside. Like the corridor above, the room looked as if it had been subjected to its own personal apocalypse. Under hoof, the shattered remains of glass jars and age-old stains covered the cracked tile floor. Rows of still intact glass vials and test tubes sat on the table, and most were lined with dark-colored coats, demonstrating the effect a few hundred years would only have on whatever they had once held. The same grimy residue formed thick puddles of bile in the large glasses and bowls that sat below the many elaborate laboratory contraptions, the sheer amount of which formed a vast sprawl of rubber pipes and valves far beyond my comprehension. I understood the many rough scribbles and notes scattered atop the desk even less so. Further down was an old set of petri dishes and scalpels, along with other delicate utensils. Sat beside them was an old medical crate, the traditional yellow box bearing pink butterflies that any wastelanders fought not to squeal over. Opposite was a long dead terminal, its screen shattered and filled with more dust than circuits. Several tools lay scattered before it as if some pony had been trying to work with the thing. Amongst them was a screwdriver, a wiring kit, and an open pack of menthols. "Well, some pony was sure having a bad day if they needed one of these things," I remarked, almost feeling sorry for the maintenance pony, whose taxing work had amounted to nothing. My attention didn't linger as I heard fidgeting behind me and turned to see the medical box open, a rather focused Cherry surveying its contents.
Bandages, a healing potion, more bandages, and... Oh, yes!
The pink mare seemed all too happy about something that wasn't potentially life-saving medical supplies as she drew out several bobby pins. She looked over each of them as if there was something that I couldn't see in the little pieces of metal.
Now, all I need is this,
she added triumphantly, looking up and reaching out a hoof for one of the tools before the terminal and the screwdriver. I stepped out of her way, and once again, she was like a filly in a candy shop, only now she knew exactly what she was after. Setting my weapon down on the desk behind me, I levitated a few medical supplies that she'd uncovered into my bags.
I was gonna take those,
she told me, looking back as if she knew the error in leaving such important supplies behind and was only now realizing it. I retrieved my weapons a moment later.
I think you'll have enough with all the stuff that you plan to sell,
I told her, glancing to her bags. One already looked full to bursting, and she smiled slightly, seeming a little embarrassed. In truth, her look was too cute for me to stomach for more than a few moments without saying something I knew I'd regret. So to save myself for any potential embarrassment, I turned away swiftly as I could and continued along the row of desks. That's when my eyes fell on a set of scales, upon which was a rock. It was bland like any other rock one would see in the wasteland, yet as I examined it closer, I quite clearly saw it was far from normal. It was a deep silver, but as the light shimmered across its surface, it flickered from purple to deep blue. Probably just another crazy experiment, I noted bluntly. But as I passed it, my attention fell on something I found far harder to ignore. An arm? It certainly looks like an arm, especially the way it was supported on what appeared to be a custom-made stand. It was not like any griffin arm, however, more like that of a hellhound, minus the claws at what I'd perceived to be the hand was missing. It wasn't that big either and appeared to have been formed from hollowed bones. It was comprised of 3 distinct parts, an upper bone, an elbow, and a lower piece, all of which were posed to look as if they were still encased in flesh. Of all things I knew about bones, however, I knew they were not supposed to be like this. Were bones supposed to be hollow? Okay, so I knew next to nothing of skeletons, but that was not the kicker. Each segment was made from the same strange shimmering silver I had just glimpsed at.
Looks like some sort of exoskeleton,
Sherry commented, trotting up beside me, her saddlebags clattering with her new prizes. An exoskeleton? I'd seen a great many creatures with a similar body design in my time, not that I knew what it meant beyond a hard shell. And on top of that were a number of wires and electronic equipment plugged into the interior of this metal exoskeleton. I swore, it looked as if these ponies were trying to make an evil wire monster or something.
I have no idea what this is,
I told my companion bluntly. My mind was more focused on the fact that with the previous observation, she was clearly a smarter pony than me, or just had a freaky knowledge about strange mechanical exoskeletons. I sighed. Couldn't I see her just as her normal self all the time? A moment later, I realized just how horribly selfish that was. She, on the other hoof, merely shrugged, oblivious to my mental conflict as she glared at the strange metal limb curiously. She wanted to take it, didn't she? I sighed once more. That thought brought a brief evaluation on just how hard the thing would be to remove. This whole lab seemed to be focused on the exoskeleton, as there appeared to be no more grand quantities of this strange silver metal about us. I trotted away a moment later, beside it was a strange appearance. That thing was giving me the creeps, as if some sort of cold aura swirled around it. The real creeps, I might add. Not the type that revolves around some stupid ghost story, and for all my caution was worth, it seemed mutual. Cherry followed me all the way from the thing, her eyes focused on anything else that she could scavenge. She was definitely a smart pony because, to be honest, I didn't think the ponies who built this place knew what that thing was either. Sub-level 3 was the next sign proclaimed as we entered from another set of increasingly chilly stairs. The almost identical corridor beyond was no warmer either, nor did the sight ease the unnerving feeling in my gut. We'd only seen one other turret on the stairs, similar to the last one. Once again, it wasn't hostile. Regardless of the place's eerie hospitality, it felt like one of the least inviting places I'd ever come across. I couldn't help but get the feeling that some pony wanted us here. It was becoming increasingly harder to shun the idea of some supernatural entity from my thoughts as we pressed onward. Above us, many of the lights still functioned, clearly marking the pathway. This time, they directed us directly ahead. On this floor, the walls had also changed, and they were cold and white. And unusually clean.
The prissy ghost,
I mind-taunted with a vile snicker. Underhoof, the black floor was clearly enough to show my faint reflection. Doors lined the walls, each leading off into an old lab room similar to that above, only these ones looked as if the workers had left only yesterday. Most unnerving of all was the persistent lack of anything wastelandy. There was no clutter, no bones, and no hostiles. So why was I so discouraged? This place seemed to be willing to do nothing more than love and tolerate the shit out of us, like some creepy enchantress inviting a foal into their home, only to bake them up into a big, tasty stew later. That wasn't the best image I could have given in my mind to chew on, but as we arrived at the end of the corridor, I was swiftly distracted. A fine film of plastic sheets separated us from a large chamber beyond. What appeared to be some sort of service elevator to the surface had tracks leading up to a large rounded tunnel to my left, and to my right was what I assumed to be the last of its cargo. They were mostly steel crates bearing the comet-tailed Destiny Corporation logo, and in the center of the large chamber, the tracks led to the elevator itself, a large metal disc sunk into the concrete floor. A control panel sat on the far side, while a guardrail separated any wandering pony from the massive hydraulics that were barely visible below. The opposite sides of the room each held doorways, and running along the smooth concrete wall above were vertical lights hanging from long strands of wire. I had a vague reminder of my trick back in the ammunition factory as I saw the ruminates of a catwalk suspended up there with them. Set into the wall itself, however, were smaller lights, the glowing likes of which beckoned me like a moth to a flame. They led towards a large doorway opposite of the elevator shaft, and above it were 3 turrets, all of which were friendly. I scowled, unable to figure out which I found worse, friendly turrets or disabled turrets. This set appeared to be drooping lazily, unlike their lost cousins above. Making sure I had eyes on all possible defenses, I trotted into the room and around the crates, following a trail of lights and making sure my blaster was locked onto the inactive guns. Corridor 23B was written in big black text above a large rectangular entrance to a tunnel. Set into the walls were thick mechanical workings of some sort of door, as well as a peculiar effect in the air. I squinted, my eyes narrowing as I tried to make it out. It looked as if the light about the doorframe was dancing. My first instincts told me that it was a gas leak, yet there was no scent suggesting such a hazard.
Oh, what is it?
Sherry asked, seeming to notice my cautious stupor. I paused, thinking for a second.
Wait here a second,
I instructed cautiously, taking a step into the doorway. And there was nothing, just a distortion of the air. My mind wouldn't let it simply rest at that, though. Something was wrong, and this whole place was off. And then it happened. As Cherry stepped forward into the doorway, there was a bright flash of light, and in an instant, the wall of distorted air lit up the whole entrance with orange light. The pink mare fell back onto her haunches as if she'd walked right into a solid wall, a shield of some kind, but just a moment ago, I didn't even have time to think about that. "Cherry!" I called out as the mare staggered about on the floor. I bolted forward, but in the same instance, the mechanical door forced itself shut with a whoosh and a loud clang, sealing her away. I slammed face first into the newly erected metal before falling back onto my rump as my magic imploded.
"Cherry?"
I whimpered, as my mind struggled to catch up to what had just transpired. In that moment, it did, and almost instinctively I reared up, banging my forehoofs upon the metal as hard as I could.
"No, what the fuck, no!"
I cursed as I brought my hooves down against the door over and over. The thick metal merely seemed to ring with laughter at my futile attempts to open it. I met the mental image of its smug face with a shot from my saddle blaster, and when that failed to even tickle it, I found itself fall victim to several bolts of plasma. And that did nothing more than turn the metal hot, singeing my hooves as I gave it one last buck, and I winced and fell to my haunches once more, panting heavily.
What the fuck? What the fuck?
I screamed through my heavy exertions. The door wasn't budging. I looked through to my armored forehoofs, massaging them as the force of several hard impacts, not to mention the heat of the last, finally caught up with me.
Still, I don't believe in ghosts,
my mind snickered. I growled both in my head and at the door, then, ignoring the painful sting in my hooves, I stood, gathering my serious talk with this pony.
"Where are you, you fucker?"
I angrily called out into the gloomy corridor ahead. My mind summoned up mental images of a million foul things crawling out of the gloom towards me, and in reality, all I got was a sharp pop as a light above the door to my right flickered to life.
"Still playing that game, aren't we?"
I asked to myself. Yeah, but if that pony so much as put a scratch on either of my friends, I'd blast them to the fucking moon. Footnote: level up. Companion perk added, Cherry Pin. One pony's trash is another's treasure. Your new companion seems to have talent and confidence to make a profit from anything. Here's hoping that they're right. Prices are reduced by 5% when traveling with this companion.